Welcome to the Expat Empire Podcast, the podcast where you can hear from expats around the world and learn how you can join them. Hey guys, before we get to the interview, I want to remind you that we're offering free 30-minute consulting calls to anyone interested in moving abroad. Whether you're thinking about retiring somewhere warm, starting the next chapter of your international career, or even becoming a digital nomad, we're ready to help you think through the next steps in your journey. Send us a message at expatempire.com and schedule a call today. With that said, let's start the conversation. Hey Adu, thanks so much for joining us today on the Expat Empire Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. It'd be great if you could tell us at first a bit about your background. So where you're originally from, where around the world you've lived so far, and where you're living right now.
Sure. So I was born in Brazil, more specifically in Recife, which is on the coast of Brazil. I lived here till I was 32, and I studied. I went to university, became an English teacher, worked here as an English teacher. But then when I was 32, in 2015, I moved to China. I lived there for nearly 5 years, and then I came back to Brazil. And because of the pandemic and everything, I've been here for just over a year now.
Okay, great. That's a really good place for us to start. And I'm super excited to talk about your experiences in China. It's a country that is super cool. And you've actually lived there, it sounds like, in many different cities as well. So definitely want to dive into that. But before we get into your China experience, could you tell me a little bit about where your interest in even studying English and becoming proficient in English, especially in a country like Brazil, where English proficiency isn't maybe the first thing that's connected with the Brazilian experience. So would love just your thoughts on your interest in the language and how you were able to develop your skills there to become a teacher.
Yeah, sure. You're actually right. Like, I think there was a survey around, 2018 saying that less than 10% of the Brazilians are actually able to speak English. And I think out of the 10%, I think it's only like 2% say that they can actually speak English fluently. So it's super low here in Brazil. I was really lucky because I studied at an American school here in Brazil. So from pre-K to 12th grade, I studied at an American school. And then, so English was like, it was a bilingual school. So like most of the subjects, I'd say, apart from Portuguese, like all of the other subjects were in English. So English just became like naturally part of my life. And then when I finished high school, some of my friends went to the US for university. I decided to stay here in Brazil. And in Brazil, we got an exam, like a university entrance exam. And it's a bit different from what happens in the US with the SAT and then applying for college. Here's a bit different. Like, you take an exam, at least when I did it, it was specifically for a university and you had to pick a course. So I didn't know what I was going to do, but then a friend of mine told me about this school, this language school that was hiring English teachers, and all you needed was basically to have fluent English. So I was 19. I had just turned 19. I went there. I did the three-day training, got the job, and basically it was just to get some pocket money. Like, I never thought of myself as a teacher. But then because I liked it so much, 6 months later, when I had to apply for the exam, I chose linguistics and literature, English and Portuguese. So that means that, like, now I'm a licensed teacher to teach English and Portuguese to middle and high school students here in Brazil. So that's how it was. Like, it was basically because of my friend, because she was like, dude, do you want to, but then it really became a passion. Like, I fell in love with teaching, and I already knew English, but I really fell in love with teaching. Then that's how I got into teaching. It's been like that since, I don't know, it's for about 19 years, I think, as an English teacher. Yeah.
Okay, great. And you started out your career then in Brazil, teaching English to Brazilians. How did it sort of change from that to thinking about maybe I would like to go abroad and have that international experience?
I've always loved the idea of, like, moving abroad. Like, when I was 16 and when I was in high school, we had French classes, and it was an elective class, but I really liked it. So I had like French from like 8th grade to 12th grade, nonstop. And then I wanted to go to France to study French, but I just couldn't, at that time. But then when I started working, I actually 2 years or 3 years after I started working, I saved up some money and I went to Nice in south of France and studied for almost a month there. I studied French, and that was my first experience, abroad. It was not too much, but I really liked it. And then the fact that I was able to like meet people from all over the world and just practice, a new language. And I was like, yeah, that's what I wanted to do. So I went backpacking in Europe other times, traveled a lot around South America, the US. And then I was like, I know that I am gonna end up abroad, sometime some point in my life. And then in 2015, it was basically like, okay, I've been teaching here for about 13 years. I've worked in like different roles, academic consultant, teacher, director of studies. I was like, I need some kind of challenge. And that's when the whole idea of like going to Asia came up, because as I just said before, like I traveled to like 3 different continents, and I was like, but Asia was always something like too far.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, I think now is the time to, try and go to Asia. And that's when I went online, found this job, found a couple of jobs, applied to this first job, and ended up in China.
How long was that process from start to finish, and what were those steps? You make it sound very easy, and perhaps it was, but if you get a little bit more in the details, I think that might help some other folks that are thinking about doing similar things.
That's actually very interesting, because the thing about like jobs in China, like it changes kind of every year. So you got to be careful with that. Like when I went there in 2015, it was a different process, the requirements, the documents and stuff. But nowadays it's a bit more different. So I'm just saying, like, whenever you look for jobs in China, make sure you check, the requirements and everything. So my process was, I basically went to TEFL.com and looked for jobs, and I picked Asia. I actually found some jobs. I applied to like 2 jobs in Russia as well, in Turkey. But then I thought that like Turkey is not that far from like Western Europe. And Russia, I mean, even though most of Russia is in Asia, Moscow is in Europe, so I'm like, it's not that far as well from the rest of Western Europe, because I've been there. So I'm like, if I want to go somewhere new, I'll choose China. So I chose China. I basically went online, found a couple of jobs. I applied through TEFL.com. They sent me an email. We had a Skype meeting, first meeting, and then the second meeting, it's just like an interview, job interview. And then they said, okay, we'll start the process. So they sent me, I had to send some documents online. They scanned copies. They prepared like a letter from the government saying that they wanted to hire me, and the government said, okay. So they sent me back, they sent me like a physical copy, like they mailed it to Brazil. Then I got this copy, went to actually I used an agent. It was super easy. I
Yeah.
didn't have to leave my house. Like Brazil is too big. So I didn't have to leave my house, no embassies, no nothing. Like send it to this agent. He got it already. In less than 10 days, I had my passport with the sticker,
Wow.
with the work visa, which in China, work visa is a Z visa. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes this is actually something very important. Like some jobs, some companies promise you a work visa, but it's actually like a business visa or
Mm.
come on a tourist visa. Like I wouldn't recommend that. Like it was, I left Brazil with a work visa, a Z visa, and then got to China, and they helped me there with everything else when I got there.
Did you just have a good sense that these guys were going to give you the right visa and figure it out? Because obviously it was your first time. You're saying now how important it is, and I've heard that from other people in my life as well as on this podcast. So if someone were to encounter the unfortunate situation of someone trying to give them the wrong visa or telling them to do something that's not 100% legal, let's say, what should they do? How should they know how to proceed? Because the first time you're just kind of not really sure what the right process is, right?
Sure. Yes, that's really important, because I actually said it's a Z visa is a work visa. Yes, but when they register a Z visa, they also say what's your role in the company or the position. So some people who get a Z visa but are not qualified to teach English in China, they might get a visa as like a manager of a company or any other thing. So just make sure that when you're doing the interview, like that they are really going to give you a Z visa, which is a work visa,
Mm.
and you're going to be like an English teacher there if that's the role. In my case, I worked with a small company, but it was a British-owned company. So I was worried because I had no idea like what to expect. And if you go to these forums and even Facebook
Mhm.
groups, it's not the best place to like, to find motivation, like to go to Asia, especially if
Yeah.
you've never been to Asia. But once I was in China, like I understood how everything worked. But yeah, I was kind of scared. So
Yeah.
just make sure like the company, read about the companies, look for like there's like I think Dave's ESL Cafe, like you have the blacklisted companies, go
Mm.
there, talk to other employees that you might find on LinkedIn and stuff, and just make sure it's like legit, because yeah, you don't want to get in trouble. And I've seen people getting into trouble like in China. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how did you decide which city to move to? I suppose that was decided by the job, but if you could talk us through ultimately picking the destination and ending up there in your first few weeks, if not months there, what those were like.
Yeah, well, actually, I was just thinking about that now. Which why did I ended up in Qingdao? Yes, it was a job, but I applied to other jobs as well. The
Mm.
thing is, before going to China, unfortunately, because Western media only shows like really bad things about China,
Yeah.
so the worst things that everyone here, I mean, everyone has seen, I'm sure, is like the pollution in China.
Right.
So it's like you see it on TV and you're like, oh my God, like, no, people wear a mask. So I avoided Beijing and the northern cities because of everything that I had seen. Qingdao is on the coast,
Mm.
and if you look at it in the map, it's actually 1 hour by plane from South Korea, Seoul in South Korea, Beijing, and 1 hour to Shanghai. So it's literally like, it's very well located. It's on the coast. And in the 2008 Olympics, Beijing Olympics, it was in Qingdao where they had the sailing competition and everything,
Mm. Mm.
So they were talking about Qingdao. Like I read and I watched some videos about Qingdao. And yeah, it is. I saw the pictures. It's like, wow, it's a beautiful city. It's not very warm, but I don't have a problem with that. But it's on the coast, and they
Mm.
say that there's less pollution compared to other bigger cities in China. So that was one of the reasons why I wanted to go there. Also, I didn't want to go. I mentioned Beijing, but I didn't want to go to Beijing or Shanghai, to be very honest. Like I loved Beijing. Beijing is my favorite city in China by far,
Mm.
but I didn't want to live there
Mm.
because I really wanted to have like a different Chinese experience. It's like if you go to Brazil and you go to Rio, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's real. Like it's everything that people talk about. Yeah, it's amazing. But Brazil is like huge. So I said no. Like I want to go somewhere that like it's not full of expats, and it's a bit more, I don't want to say Chinese, but yeah, it's a bit less Western,
Right.
even though it's still Western, but yeah.
Did you feel like one of the few foreigners there, or did you end up? How did you actually make friends, and how did you meet people? What was the feel like? Were you really, the foreigner in the Chinese environment?
Yeah, it's funny because the whole Qingdao metropolitan area, like the bigger Qingdao, has about 8 million people. That's a lot of people. But the place where the school was, it was kind of far from the downtown area. So there were maybe only two or three English schools that had foreign teachers, and our school was one of them. So in our school, there were 10 foreigners, 11 foreigners. So yeah, most of the time, I mean, we were, it was our expat bubble there. Like 10 of us, we would, hang out together and stuff. But then in China, like it's really common for students to invite teachers, like to hang
Hmm.
out, go out, even go drinking and stuff. I'm talking about adult students, of course, but like adult students would invite us, for dinners, for like parties and stuff. So we would also hang out with students and friends of students, and then we would go to the local cafe owned by Chinese, and then this person would become our friend as well. So we started like to expand our bubble. So we had a lot of, it was us there, but then every time we went downtown, and downtown was like 45 minutes by taxi. So every time we got downtown, yes, there you had expats from like all over the world, and it was just super international. But I really like this feeling, and
Hmm.
I like the fact that like Qingdao has something that I had no idea about, like before getting there. They have, I think they have the largest Korean community in
Hmm.
China
Hmm.
because it's so close to Seoul. There are many flights, like daily flights to Seoul and stuff. So there are many factories, especially where we were in Qingdao. So I'd say that 40% of my students were from Korea.
Hmm.
So it was also nice to have this mix of like Korean culture and Chinese culture, and also expats, as well. So yeah, that was how I made. That was the beginning, like how I started, making friends and expanding our bubble.
Yeah, and you mentioned that the students there, at least you were referring to the adult students. Was the job specifically with adult students, or and how did you make a decision between that versus with elementary school kids? And I mean, there's so many different scenarios that you can teach English. So, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'd say there are four different scenarios in China. Okay, specific about China. The number one and the largest group is English schools. Okay, so they call it training centers or language schools or English schools. That's by far the largest market, and you can get like anything. Like I mean, from 7,000 RMB a month to 20,000 RMB a month. Like it's like this, and then and that's where I chose was a training center. But you have universities which are usually the lowest paying jobs, teach English at universities. And then you have public schools, kindergartens as well. And then the last one are the international schools or international programs. And that's, I'm sure I'm going to talk about that because that was my second and third job in China. So, but yeah, at the beginning was an English school. And I decided to do that to teach. I taught kids, teens, and adults, and I wanted to go to an English school because that was my setting in Brazil. Like that was my background. Like I've worked here at language schools for many years. So I said, I know I'm going to change already to like China, but at least I know how it works. Like even the materials I use similar books, that I use here in Brazil. So that was a bit easier.
Yeah, definitely. So you had traveled around Europe. You had done a lot of travels before, even in the U.S. And you said, indeed, you wanted to have a very different experience. You decided to go to China. And so, what was that like? Were you immediately hit with culture shock, or did it not really affect you too much? And because you're so well traveled, it didn't bother you, or didn't affect you. But how was that?
I thought that it wouldn't affect me that much because I have traveled, so much. But yeah, it did. It did. Like it was. China is a whole different world, and even like just like as soon as you step out of your house, like it's obvious that you're a foreigner. Like especially when you live in smaller cities, so everyone is going to be staring at you, and it's all of that. Like I of course I didn't have that, in other countries. It was the first time I actually had that, and but in a nice way, people are curious. People want to know about you. They ask where you're from, and they're all very friendly. But it was like the food, even eating with like chopsticks,
Hmm.
the food, the language, the culture, and you see so many babies everywhere and so many kids, and you're like, wow. And yeah, like the toilets, that was the first. These are the first things. As soon as you get there,
Yeah,
it's all there.
100%. Yeah.
But at the same time, it's good that like I could have this feeling because I think the world is so globalized and so international that in a way it's bad like when we travel to we travel so far and we kind of see the same restaurant or the same McDonald's or the same KFC, and we're like so it was good that I had this feeling. So yeah, I did experience culture shock, but I think that it wasn't as bad as some of my friends, because when I left Brazil, I was like, I'm gonna make this happen. Like I was like,
Mhm.
there's no plan B.
Right. Right.
A lot of my friends told me that. They were like, what if you don't like China? What if you want to come back? I'm like, listen, there's no coming back. Like, I mean, at least for 2 years,
Yeah.
I'm gonna stay there, and that's it. So that was my attitude, and I think that helped me a lot. Getting through these first couple of months.
So there were other people that after those first few months, they said, this isn't for me and headed back, or did you have any tough stories with people that you knew there?
Absolutely, yes. There were friends who got like food poison, which is
Mm.
normal. I
Oh,
mean,
that's very normal. Yeah.
yeah, anyone like from I don't know the US here come to Brazil, like they're gonna get that as well. It's normal, like so. But there were people who were like they didn't like they I think they didn't want to accept that like it is different, and it's not because it's so different that what you do or the way you do stuff is better or anything. So they didn't want to accept that. Like for example, I heard teachers that are complaining how the students or the parents are too nosy, and they want to know more. They want to watch their classes, they want to observe, they're very demanding, like they want more and more and more homework and more this. And they were like, they didn't accept that, and they didn't accept that. For example, we worked. I mean, I knew I was going to work on weekends. That's normal in China. Some people didn't accept that at all. Some people didn't accept like the holidays. That
Mm,
it's a bit weird, the holiday thing in China. But like, yeah, like sometimes we have a holiday on Monday, and then we end up working on Sunday, and then
mm,
so these small things, some people, the Chinese are a bit too loud. It's true, and they have a problem with, like, for example, okay, just as compared to like Western standards, now it's like a personal space,
mhm, mhm.
so which of course in the beginning is a bit shocking, but after some time you're like, oh, you get used to it,
Mhm.
so once you go beyond this, then it's a matter of asking yourself, okay, do you really want to make this happen? Because I thought some people there just wanted the travel experience and leave. And
Right.
I've seen a lot of expats doing that there. They just want to go there, get some money so they can travel. That was not my plan. That's what I'm
Mm,
saying. Like, so yeah, it's fine. But some people are like, no, I want to go and spend a year. And some people literally spend a year, while
right.
others like went there for a year and they're still there. Like,
Right.
so yeah.
And you mentioned travel, so I just want to touch on that briefly. Did you get a chance to really travel around China and the broader region, or were you more, let's get that local environment and more just hang around the city that you were in at the time?
Both, actually. I
Mm,
loved hanging around, like, the province and then the northern part of China to some other place, like Beijing, for example. I've been to Beijing 4 times, 4 different
mhm,
times. It's my favorite city in China, even beyond the touristy area. Like, I love the culture in Beijing. Like,
mm,
I've been to Shanghai a couple of times, Shenzhen, the biggest cities, and I've also been like to. It's one of the things that I didn't know about China is like how they really enjoy like hiking and mountains and nature. So I've traveled to other places that, if I say here, like, people are not going to know, but I just want to mention one place that was by far my favorite place in China. It's really common. It's really popular among expats. It's called Yangshuo,
mm,
Yangshuo,
mm,
and it's in Guilin province. And if you just want to know where it is, just get a Google a 20 RMB bill and since look at
mhm,
the back, and you see those mountains, and it's just Jesus, it's just beautiful. It's so much nature. So I literally spent like a week there cycling,
mhm.
hiking, swimming in the rivers, and it was just an amazing. It's one of the most beautiful places I've been like in the world. So yeah, so that's a great thing about China. You get the high tech, super developed cities like Hong Kong, for example, as well, and you get these places that are like, more countryside and stuff. So yeah, I tried to travel around China, and I also traveled to a couple of countries, other countries, in Asia.
Yeah, I've been to Yangshuo as well, and that was a really amazing place. I didn't get to spend a week there, but even just a weekend. And I think it was going down the river and taking out the 20 RMB bill, like you said, and oh, there it is. You
Yeah,
see it right
yes.
there. It's an amazing place. Yeah, definitely. I was also curious about if it was important for you to pick, even just on a personal level, to learn some Chinese. Or I don't know if you'd cite any before you went, but if you could talk about that a bit in terms of actually living in China, how important it is to speak Chinese, that would be great.
Yeah, the thing is, when something that was really shocking was when I arrived at the airport, Beijing International Airport. I had like a 3 hour wait till I got my next flight, and then I went to buy like coffee, a latte, and a croissant, and then I literally got to this big cafe inside the country's, perhaps, I don't know, largest airport, and I just said, "Can I have a coffee and a croissant?" And she was like, "What?" And she couldn't speak English.
Mm,
And I know probably today it's going to be different, but in 2015, that's what happened in my
mm,
first 10 minutes in China. And that's when I realized, I'm like, wow, I'm in the largest, airport city,
right.
international place, and they can speak English. So that's one thing I would have done differently. I would have learned a bit more Chinese, because for the job, you don't need English. And they said, like, we offer free Mandarin classes in the school. And I had those classes when I got there, but I would have learned a bit more because I needed to be together. I needed to be with people who could speak Chinese. Like, so I think everyone does, no matter how fluent you are, you need to open a bank account and stuff like that. But what I'm
Right.
saying is, to meet locals, if you know basic Mandarin, like, it does help a lot, even if you're going to a big city like Shanghai.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can imagine doubly so, triply so if you're going to a smaller city, right? even though
definitely.
in China, the small cities are really big.
Yes, yes.
Awesome. So I know that you, I believe, spent about 1 year in that city and then moved on to the next city. So if you could talk us through that transition, how you found the next opportunity, how you picked the next city, then that would be great.
Yeah, sure. The So after 1 year in Qingdao, it was towards the end of my contract, and my boss talked to me and said he wanted to, like, extend my contract, renew my contract, and for 1 more year. And I wanted to stay there because I knew many people and I was comfortable and stuff. But that's the thing about China. As I said about Brazil, like, it's such a big country that I know China is a bit bigger than Brazil, but like, if you go to one city in Brazil, depending where you are, you don't know Brazil. So I'm from the Northeast. It's 3 hours by plane to Sao Paulo, for
Mm,
example,
mm,
and it's like two different worlds. Like,
mhm,
it's almost our winter here, and it's 29 degrees, and it's so, and that's how it is all year round, basically. So what I'm saying is, I was like, okay, I've been 1 year in Qingdao. It's kind of the north of China, close to Beijing. Yeah, so I want to live 1 year in the south now. And Qingdao is a very, very wealthy province. So like, you can see that, like, people are wealthy, and the buildings and everything. So I went to Jiangxi province, which most people don't know about, and it's not a wealthy province at all. Like, everyone that I would say, like, in Qingdao, I'm going to move to Nanchang, which is the capital. They're like, why, like, you
mhm.
know. So it's in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it's inland, it's not on the coast, yes, but I was like, you know what, I'm going to go there. And why I decided to go there, I just basically went again at tafel.com, found three other jobs, applied to them, and then I was in between this city and a city close to Shanghai, also a very wealthy region. And I was like, I don't want to go to another wealthy region. Like, I want to see more of, rural China and stuff. So the second main reason was that I wanted to make this shift from language school to international program inside a public school. So that was the job there in Nanchang. So I had less hours, working hours, salary was kind of the same, but I would teach students in an international program who were all going to go abroad. So they were high school students who were all going to go abroad, mostly to the US and Australia, some to the UK and Canada as well. So yeah, that was my second year in China.
So could you just describe a bit? Obviously, you've talked about some of the demographic differences, but what was your lifestyle? Was that different from in Qingdao?
I lived on campus for my first year, so that was amazing because like, I didn't mention rent, but like, this in China, it's really common for the schools to offer an apartment
Mm,
or a monthly stipend. Like, in my case, they offered the apartment. So I lived on campus in a really small apartment, with a perfect apartment with a balcony, very nice. And I would just literally walk for 5 minutes and I'd be in the classroom. So that was amazing, just to be able to live on campus. Apart from that, I think it was a bit like, how can I say? I was in Qingdao. I was kind of like on the outskirts of the city. In Nanchang, I was downtown,
mm,
let's say, but still the pace is not like Qingdao,
right.
and things are not that far. So that was the perhaps the main difference. But yeah, it was as cold. I mean, it was not that cold, but still it was very cold in the winter and boiling in the summer. So that
Mm,
was perhaps the main difference. And but the rest of I don't think it was that much of a difference, to be very honest. Like, yeah, I just think it's a smaller city, so
mm,
it's around 4 point something million people. But I think it's a very nice city. Like, it's a smaller downtown area, so it's easier to meet everyone. So just imagine, like, my friends there, the farthest we would go would be 40 minutes on a taxi to get to a place, but still that would be like the airport. Like, apart
mhm.
from that, everything was like 15, 20 minutes away.
Right, right. So you mentioned wanting to also go to the city because it wasn't as wealthy of a province. It was more rural, let's say. So did you find it to be a more rural experience? And what did that look like to you when you experienced it?
In Nanchang, in my second year, it was not that rural. Like, later in my third year, yes, but in this second year, no. It's a big city, but still, it's not as wealthy. And when I say not as wealthy, like, I like, my friends, like, not my students, but like friends that I met, locals and stuff. You'd see that they were more humble people. Like, they had money, but still, they would be like, like the barbecue place, the restaurants, everything was kind of like more chilled, I'd say, than like some posh or expensive places that they were in Qingdao. Of course, you had that as well in Nanchang. You have the 200, 300 RMB for steak in a
Mm,
restaurant, yes. But I'm saying that like it's more laid back,
mhm,
this
mm,
province, I think. And that's what I wanted to see, because not only that city, but I wanted to travel around that region so I could see more rural China in a way, because I went to like hiking in some mountains. I went to the countryside, rice fields, and stuff like that. You could
mm.
do that, because it's so easy with the high speed train. Like just travel around for the day or for the weekend, and that was amazing. So that's what I wanted to do. Like go to the north, explore. Go to the south, explore.
But you must have also, I guess, experienced quite different cuisine. At least I would imagine so, given in China it can differ quite greatly between regions. So, was it another adjustment period for you?
Yeah, that was tough actually, because food in China is spicy.
Yeah.
Um, and then my students say, no, it's spicy from that province. I'm like, no, listen, guys, it's spicy, period. But some provinces like Nanchang, Jiangxi province, the second place, it's spicier than in the north in Qingdao. So that was definitely a huge problem. Like at the beginning, I used to go to like barbecue place and I would say not spicy, not spicy, and it would still be spicy. And
Right.
that's just how it is. Like I mean, I got used to it, of course, but the cuisine is a bit difference actually when I moved to the south. But the good thing is that, as you said, like there's so many different cuisines in China, like different depending on the region, and then you would also have these different restaurants in both cities. So I know I really like the Cantonese cuisine,
Mhm,
so I would go to that restaurant. But I'd also like the local cuisine because of the noodles they have in the morning. Like it's
mhm.
really nice. So I would also go there. So even in smaller cities, you would have that and a bit of international restaurants options like Pakistani, Indian, Italian. Like you'd have these different restaurants, and you could also go like American, a proper like American burger and stuff. You'd also find that, but of course, much more expensive.
And if you could talk for a bit about the experience of changing to work with the international program. So it sounds pretty exciting, actually, to be able to help people that are on the verge of going to an English-speaking country from China. So they're almost doing the reverse of what you did, right, in a sense. So yeah, what was that like?
That was an amazing experience, like because the kids like in China, high school is 10th, 11th, 12th grade, so it's the last 3 years. And I would teach these students, and part of the classes were like helping them with the exam, like the IELTS exam or TOEFL. And the other part of the class was like grammar, public speaking, communicative skills, and stuff like that. It was really cool because I would be like teaching, like really helping these kids, like before making this big move and like anticipating problems and helping them. Like once they got accepted into colleges, we would look into like the college, and I would, help them with that as well. So it was a really cool experience to do that, because it's different when you're learning a language and you might never leave your
Mhm.
country. These kids were actually gonna go in like 1 or 2 years. They were gonna move abroad and stuff. So it was an amazing experience. And also I was kind of tired of like, just like in language school, sometimes everything is so fast, because you need to give that lesson and you need to cover that topic and you need to do that. And in this school, of course, we had the syllabus and everything, but it was more like, okay, if the student can't learn, this kind of essay, it's okay for you to like keep, working on that with them. So I like the pace.
Mhm.
And I liked that the lessons. Oh, I liked again working from Monday to Friday as well. Like I wouldn't work on weekends, and the lessons, like, yeah, it was good because sometimes I would wake up in the morning, teach from 8 to 12, and then I was done.
Mhm.
So it was a bit more like I had much more time to plan my classes and help students and stuff. So I really like that. And I really like being in international programs. So international program, just so people can have an idea, there were 10th, 11th, 12th grade, there were about 70 or 80 students. But then they were inside one building, and the other, and which was inside this campus with like, I don't know, 7,000, 8,000 students. But they were part of the public
Mhm.
school, the Gaokao program. Yeah.
Mm, got it. So it sounds like you had adjusted well to this well, at least decently well to this new cuisine, this new city, different experience. You were enjoying working with the students. So why did you decide to move to the next city?
Yeah, so I went. I usually say that I went to China for the adventure
Mm.
because I wanted to see something completely different. But I stayed for the money, and it's very. When I say that, some people are like, "What?" I'm like, "Of course, it's not only the money. Of course, I love the country. I love the students. Of course, but once you get to China, you're like, okay, like I'll, come here and I'll give you double your salary. And they're like, what? And I'm not, I mean, I've been a teacher my whole life and I'm not used to that, like
Right,
it's
right.
it's
Being in
something that you're like,
demand.
yes. And you're like, what? So this my third year in China was actually in the same province, 40 minutes by train, high-speed train. And that was more rural, like in the countryside, the city called Fuzhou, close to Nanchang, but it's like 40 minutes away. Also an international program, the same way as just described this one. It was the same thing, an international program inside a public school, a big school. I accepted the offer because yeah, it was a great offer, and I wouldn't be that far from Nanchang, so I could always
Mm.
see my friends there on the weekends. So I decided to stay. I'm like, oh, and then I had to sign a 2-year contract, and I was like, wow, I came here for 2 years. Now I'm signing for 2 more years. So, but yeah, it was the money was good, and of course, the experience was also. I was having a great time. I cannot lie. So yeah, that's why I decided to make this move, and now I was kind of okay. Like I was not scared anymore. I could speak a bit of Chinese.
Mm.
My friends were there in the capital city. I always spent the weekend there with them. So I'm like, you know what? It's okay. Like I'm used to international program. By that time I was already used. So that's why I decided to, make this move and go there to Fuzhou. Um,
It sounds like then it would have been much easier transition because indeed it's so close. So, did you feel like you still wanted more adventure, or I mean, I guess it sounds indeed like you're saying it was switching more to being focused on job opportunities, which is great to be able to get those options there. But did you? I don't know. It almost felt like maybe the third place would be yet another whole different part of such a gigantic country. So just curious on your thoughts on changing that focus and indeed deciding that you would actually stay for even 2 more years after you thought you might be headed back or somewhere different.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same setting, but
Mhm.
I was also responsible for the English program. So I had to like help, changing and adapting and improving the English program. But yeah, the setting was the same. The hours were longer. I had more responsibility and
Mm.
stuff, but it was, yes, very similar. I still wanted to be there because I wanted to explore the region a bit
Mm.
more.
Mm.
And I also wanted to travel not only inside China but also to other countries, and that's how I got to like travel a bit around other Asian countries. So, but I did like I love the I was really comfortable, like, and that's weird when you to be feeling that in China. Being very honest, like it's weird that, but I was so comfortable that I didn't see myself moving somewhere else at that time. I wanted to stay there because it was kind of home already for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, like I literally just moved to another city because of the offer, but I was still in a way in Nanchang because I would go there every weekend. Like as I said, 37 minutes on a train is nothing. Like so, yeah.
So you were living in Fuzhou, which was very near to Nanchang, and you signed that 2 year contract. So what was your plan going into the second year or coming up on the end of that second year in that new contract?
Yeah, so I started my 2-year contract there, and then at the end of that 2-year contract, so that's like 4 years in China, my boss talked to me and said, "Would you like to extend it to 2 more years?" And I was like, "Yes, I'll do that." I mean, it was not that simple, but yes, I decided to stay there because everything was great and stuff. But then something happened. I actually when I went on holidays like to Europe to meet up with my mom and stuff. And then when I came back to China, it was the beginning of my 5th year. And I was not feeling very how can I say, not very happy there anymore. And I didn't know why at first. Now I actually realized that it was all the changes in the international program. And also some of my friends had left China because of some changes in like visa requirement and stuff. So a lot of my friends had left. And I just thought that like the school was more interested in like the high TOEFL score instead of everything else. I'm more than an English teacher. I'm an educator. I love, really getting the students like from medium, average level, whatever, to like the highest they can be. So I didn't like that. I was not that excited anymore. That was when I told my boss, listen, instead of ending the contract in June 2020, 2021, I want to end my contract on June 2020. And he said, okay, no problem. You've been here for so many years. Don't worry, that's fine. So that was when, yeah, I talked to my boss. I remember December 2019, and he accepted, and that was fine. So the problem is, 1 month later, I flew to Brazil, and because of the pandemic and everything, I wasn't able to get back to China. So my boss actually told me to go back, but when he told me to go back, it was around April. Europe, I mean, I'm sure you've all seen like Italy and Spain and other European countries. It was really bad. So I told him, no way, like I'm not gonna fly because I need to fly via Europe at least.
Right, right.
So I told him, no, I'm not going. And then I ended my contract, yes, in June 2020, but I came here for 2 weeks, and it's been a year and 3 months now. But yeah.
So as you reflect on that experience, I mean, and yeah, now that you've been there for over a year, how has it been? It must have been so abrupt. It's hard to even imagine what you were going through. You left all of your stuff there. You were expecting to come back, and 2 weeks turns into this long period of time. So just if you could just tell me a bit about what you experienced, what you felt over this time, would be great.
I It hasn't been easy, but because of everything that's happening with the world right now, of course. But it hasn't been easy, as you said, because literally I have 4 years and a half of China inside one suitcase, and it's with a friend still in China.
Mm.
So I haven't received like you know, and yeah, it's still there. Like I trust my friend; she's also from Brazil, so it's there with her. But still, literally, like I had a friend, a Chinese friend, go into my apartment with his phone and his camera on and video call, and I would say, open this drawer, get this, please put that back, please throw that away, do this with this, put it all in a suitcase. Does it fit? No. So remove this, throw it away for 2 hours, and just going through my stuff and doing that. And that was so sad, like really, because yeah, like I had everything there. So that was really sad. I couldn't say goodbye to my students. I couldn't say goodbye to some friends. I couldn't go to, I wanted to visit Guangzhou. I wanted to visit other places, and I couldn't go. So that was this really sad part. And it took me some time to like digest everything, because even though I'm in my hometown in Brazil, and my mom is here, my family is here, some friends are here, it's not the same, because I was not expecting this. Like my plan, I actually didn't say this in the beginning, but my plan was always to move to Europe. And that in 2015, I was thinking about moving to Europe, but China was, as I said, the adventure. So I said, I'm going to spend 2 years in China, and then I'm going to eventually move to Europe. But yeah, 2 years turned into 5. And then I'm now back home, and I didn't want to be here. Like, to be very honest, like I have this love and hate relationship with Brazil,
Hmm.
and I love a lot of things, but I also hate a lot of things here about this country. So yeah, it's great that I'm here. Like, I'm not gonna complain, because I have friends who are in Malaysia. Like,
Hmm.
they've been in Malaysia since then, like over a year, and they're not, they're from Europe. And I have friends in Thailand, in the Philippines, still stuck, waiting to go back to China. So in a way, I'm lucky that I'm lucky to be here. So my plan now is like to basically just do my stuff here, work online, and wait till things get better, and eventually in the second semester, hopefully move to Europe.
Okay, great. Well, it sounds like a great plan that you have going forward, but if you could go back in time, which we all know that none of us can, but if you could, and you had ended up actually been able to, if you had been able to stay there in China instead of going to Brazil and perhaps waited out however long this will take, but this whole pandemic in China, would you have preferred that outcome, or relative to that, you're still happier being where you are now?
Wow, that's a great question. Okay, if you had asked me that 3 months, 6 months after I had arrived here in Brazil, I would have said, definitely take me back to China right now. Yes. Right now, I'm like, no, it's good that I'm here. My friends, my close friends know me. Like they know that it's kind of a joke that I'm stuck in Brazil because they know that like the last place I wanted to be was Brazil. Like they make fun of me actually, you know. But and I think that's actually something good because the only way for me to stay in Brazil for 1 year, I mean longer than 2 months, is a pandemic or a
Yeah.
world war. Like that's the only way. So I'm glad I'm here because I've been like last weekend I was with my mom. It was her birthday, and then my newborn nephew was there as well. So I love, it's great to enjoy these moments. I love the food here. Like, oh my God, like I love Brazilian food. And I love a lot of, like, of course, my friends and everything. And the weather is nice. Like, so I went to the beach, I live literally 3 blocks from the beach. So it's like, yeah, like, even
Yeah.
with COVID and everything, I can still go and walk at the beach if I want now. So
Right.
it's good that I'm here because I know that as soon as I leave and the borders open,
You're out.
I won't be coming. I won't be. I will. Yeah, I won't be coming back anytime soon. So yeah.
Not that I want to get into it too deeply, but I'm just curious because you mentioned it. Could you talk a little bit, even in just some high level pointers, on what it exactly is that isn't your favorite about living in Brazil that maybe gets under
Mhm.
your skin a bit over the last year?
It's tough. We could have a whole show about that.
Yeah,
Okay,
maybe we
love
should.
and hate, love and hate relationship. Well, I'm gonna say I'm gonna start just saying like the things that I love about this country. I love the culture, the music, the food, the nature. Like I went to beaches in Thailand. Yes, they were beautiful, but listen, I can drive for 40 minutes and it's something like Thailand. Like I'm not joking. Like it's paradise here. Like,
Mm,
and as I said, it's in my region. I'm in the Northeast, close to the equator, so it's 25 something degrees, 28 all year round. I love that we can literally just, I can go to the beach every single day. That's why when I travel, I like to go like during winter where it's snowy because to go to a beautiful beach, yeah, I have it here. Like, so I love the how people, especially in the northeastern region of Brazil, like how people are so friendly and nice and like they'll talk to you and even if they don't know you, you're gonna go buy bread at the bakery, they're gonna start a conversation like, and I love that about Brazil as well. And I think I yeah, like these are actually I think the best things about the country. What I hate about the country is the fact that I don't take, like, I mean, if it's like in the evening, like I wouldn't walk too much. Like if it's like 2 blocks, I would go. But like I don't want, like it's not safe.
mm,
Like especially depending, of course, with the region where you are and everything. Like some foreigners would say, no, it's not that dangerous. Well, come and live here and then you'll see how dangerous it is. It is not a safe country, and it's and I really that's what I really loved about China. Actually, it's the safest
mm,
country I've ever been to. So I also love and hate the people
mm,
because, as I said, they're super friendly, but at the same time, the people are super, like the government is corrupt, but the people are very corrupt as well.
mm,
Brazilians are corrupt. They always try to find a way out, a way into doing things their own way. And I think that is one of the reasons why we're still the way we are. Like
mm,
we're not a high superpower, a superpower in the world, politically, economically. We're not because it's like so much corruption and like so. When I was in my late teens, I don't know, early 20s, I literally realized that like after going to Europe so many times, after going to the US, I was like, there is no way till the day I die that Brazil will ever be anything similar
mm,
to a regular average European country or the US, or like there's no way. And I still
mm,
believe in that. Like, and don't get me wrong, I'm from Brazil. My many people that I love live here, but being exposed to these other countries in Europe and the US and Asia now, like South Korea, Thailand,
oh yeah.
Vietnam. I mean, they're not perfect countries, but still, like, there's no way Brazil is going to get there because, yeah, there's all of these problems. So, safety is perhaps, as I said before, like, it's not safe here. And safety perhaps is the number one thing that I'm looking for when I move to a country. And
Right.
so that's one of the reasons why, as well, other countries in South America are now my first option
Mm,
because even though they might be safer than Brazil, and some of them really are, of course, it's still not as safe as I would like to be, as a place that I would like to be, like my ideal place. So yeah, that's basically it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate your honest and, of course, your view as someone from there and has now been back for a bit. But as we go into kind of wrapping up our conversation here, I'd love to hear more about your series called Ready Go Expat. So I know that you've talked to a lot of other expats. You've talked about your experience on there. So just share a little bit about how you started it, why you started it, and how it's grown since you began.
Sure. In December 2019, on my birthday, actually, I decided to start the YouTube channel Ready Go Expat. But the first video was uploaded in December, but I actually started recording the videos in June 2019. Why I did that? I was thinking that, like, after being exposed to like so many different cultural backgrounds, like, because when you live in China, you're not only exposed to like Chinese culture, you're exposed to like Indian, Pakistani, cultures from like all over the world, and then you're in this melting pot of like different cultures, different accents, everybody speaking English with their own accent. And I learned so much in these 4.5 years there. I was like, I need to show this to the world, because I don't know, okay, I'm gonna sound like John Lennon. Like, you may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. That's John Lennon, right? Oh my God, right?
I'm gonna say probably, yeah. It sounds like it.
I hope it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of a dreamer, but I think that there's so much hatred in the world. There's so much people not listening to each other. That happens, of course, in my country, in China, in like, because we're all in these digital bubbles. Okay. But even on top of that, when you watch something or you listen to the news, you watch the news like about another country, it's usually negative, it's usually bad, and people are not aware of how beautiful some different cultural backgrounds, festivals, parties, traditions. People are not aware of that. So I wanted to show that, like, I wanted to get a camera, literally just walk on the streets of China and say, guys, this is China. It's not pollution and earthquake and everything and tsunami. Like, I don't know. It's not only that, like, China is beautiful. The language is beautiful. The culture, the food. So I wanted to show that more. And that was the initial plan. That was basically the initial plan, like, show more of that to people, and then get someone from Pakistan to talk about, what is it like to be an international student in China? Just give me your perspective. And then someone from Ghana and say, well, when I arrived in China, and show his perspective. So basically show different perspectives, because what I think, being very honest, is that at the end of the day, my friends from Spain and my friends from Thailand, they kind of want the same thing. They want a safe place for their families. They want to party if they're young. They want to meet people. They want to experience, taste different kind of cuisines, and that's it. Like, we all kind of want the same things. So that was the initial plan. But the funny thing is that, of course, I started it in December 2019, and then January 2020, the pandemic starts. So, like, borders closed, nobody can travel, nobody can see anything. So
right on. Well, it'd be great if you could tell us how our listeners can find out more about you and what you're doing, and of course to tune into Ready Go Expat as well.
Sure. So if you want to watch the videos, as David mentioned, there's the YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Ready Go Expat. I've also got my podcast, which is called Expats Exposed. So the podcast started after the channel, actually, in 2020, but after 1 year after the channel started. And it's basically to get to do what David is also doing, like to, meet people, share their stories, get people from all different countries and different perspectives, and just share their story about like living abroad, moving abroad. So that was the whole idea, and that's what I do. So you can go to any podcast platform and just type Expats Exposed, and you'll find me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your stories today, Edu. Look forward to keeping in touch, and definitely see you on the other show soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Hey guys, don't forget to like our video, subscribe to our channel, and leave your comment below. You can find us on Facebook and Instagram at Expat Empire. We help people to move abroad through our personalized consulting services. For more information, check out expatempire.com. Thanks, and see you soon.